G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Trewin. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Callum Laing from Veblen Director Program. He's based in Singapore. Thanks for your time today, Callum.
Pleasure, Troy. Looking forward to this.
Let's start with how we know each other. Karina on your team reached out, thought you'd be a great guest for us.
Let's hope she's right.
Well, tell our audience a bit about your business. I know you've got a storied business career, but maybe tell us a bit about the current one.
Yeah, so the current one was kind of set up as it's not my core business, but it was set up as a result of a problem that I was seeing in my core business. So my core business is doing small business M&A, taking companies public. We've taken over 100 small businesses public in the last 8-9 years. And as a direct result of that, I ended up sitting on a lot of boards and advising a lot of boards and hiring a lot of directors and firing a few directors. And I kind of, up until that point, I had been quite enamored with boards. I was sort of, didn't know anything about them, but I assumed that they were these amazing things like, you know, in corporate world, when the board flies in, everything stops. I was like, oh, I've got to get ready for the boardroom. And like, there's kind of this mystique around them. And then when you get on these boards, it was a little bit underwhelming. And on top of that, I realized that what was happening was board members were just hiring people that they knew and liked and trusted. And a lot of them were on the boards for the wrong reasons. They were just in it for their own personal reasons, not for the stakeholders. And there was a lot of super, super talented people that wouldn't get onto boards because they didn't tick the right box. They didn't go to the right schools. They were entrepreneurs, couldn't get into a corporate environment. They came from the wrong country, wrong gender, wrong race, whatever. And as an entrepreneur, overlooking talent really frustrates me. So I figured out a kind of couple of little hacks for how first timers can get that much needed board experience, because it's a little bit like the beginning of your career, the end of your career. So you try and get a board seat and everyone goes, I'm sorry, you haven't got any board experience, which is a little bit like when we started out and we're trying to get a job and people said, no, sorry, you haven't got any work experience. You go, yeah, but hang on. Right. So that happens in the board world as well. So I set up this company and it was it's funny. I just put an email out to my mailing list and said, and on LinkedIn, I said, look, I'm setting up this program to help women and minorities get their first seats on boards. And the first 7 people that applied were men, and 4 of them were white.
So they couldn't read clear instructions.
I think it was just, I'll just ignore that. If I talk nicely to Callum, he'll get me a board seat. But kind of what we realized as well is that it's actually easier to get a board seat internationally than it is to get one locally. And if you look internationally, then everyone is diverse. And this conversation about diversity on boards is happening everywhere. We've got offices in Singapore. It's a big issue here in Asia. I've got an office in Dubai. It's a massive issue in the Middle East about lack of diversity on boards. Africa, same thing. So in the West, everyone thinks it's just a white thing, and it's not. It's everyone needs this. So yeah, set up a company a couple of years ago to train people not only how to get their first board seat, but how to add massive value once they're on the board. So they're genuinely looking at what can you do to grow the business, and have built that into, we've got 200 members sitting on more than 300 boards worldwide over the last couple of years, and just incredible people and incredible network now. So that's what Veblen does.
That's great. I currently sit on 5 boards myself and chair most of those. I've really enjoyed the experience. The longest one I've been on is a bit over 8 years now. Ratho Farm, Australia's oldest golf course, actually, I think in the Southern Hemisphere, 18-hole course, and 22 rooms accommodation, about an hour out of Hobart where I live. That's a great business. And the second longest one I've been on is the Hobart Brewing Company, which is the second largest craft brewery here in Tasmania, our state. And I've really enjoyed that role. Firstly, I had a really good chairperson when I was running Lark Distillery here in Tasmania for a couple of years when the family sold out. But the last couple of 8 years now on those various boards, you may appreciate the first point I'm going to make is it is a lot of fun having those discussions and then not having to do any of the fucking work. CEO or the GM goes off and actually executes, and you've just
Yeah.
had this intellectual argument with everyone in a professional way to get to the right decision, and then they go off and execute. And I love that. But I really also enjoy having obviously high caliber, smart people around the table that are very professional and from different corners of the business, like marketing, for example. And
Yeah.
you learn from them, build on their networks as well. I've really enjoyed that time, and especially being in the chair role of being able to influence both shareholders, board, GM, or CEO, the leader of the business, to get the conversation going and flowing and everyone contributing and really challenging those points. So it's one role I don't talk about very often at my part-time job, but I really, really enjoy this. I'm looking forward to diving deep on this.
And I think it's really overlooked, especially I think amongst entrepreneurs. So, which kind of your audience. But if you look at the global market of businesses, there's 330 million companies in the world, for-profit companies in the world. Less than 1% of them have an active functioning board. And yet every single successful company you can think of has an active functioning board. So there's clearly some kind of correlation there somewhere. Yet most small business owners, we tend to think, oh, a board is something that I'll do like when I'm bigger and when I've got more resources. And actually, I'm a huge advocate that a board should almost be the first thing that you do. So if I start a business, it doesn't need to be a formal board of directors, it can be a board of advisors. But just put some smart people around you that have some distance, and literally like one bit of information can save you going down a black hole for 6 months, or one connection can completely transform your business journey. So I'm a massive advocate that every small business should have a board of advisors. But not only that, I'm a huge advocate that every entrepreneur should be sitting on boards of other companies. And I always get tons of pushback on this. Look, I already work 24/7, 8 days a week. Like, how on earth and why would I care about somebody else's business? Um, but apart from, as you've said, it's fun, and you get to have this high level strategic discussions about somebody else's business without having to then do the work. What you discover is that they've probably solved a few of the problems that you're working on, and you might have solved a few of the problems that they're working on. And you can just give that little bit of transfer of knowledge can make a huge difference. Plus, it gives you massive credibility. It gives you credibility with your clients. It gives you credibility with your staff, any investors. So I'm not just the owner of this company. I also sit on the boards of two or three other companies. It's that validation and credibility that comes with that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are missing out on. And you just get so much back from it. And yeah, it can be hugely lucrative as well. But I think there's so many intangibles that you get back from it. So big
Yeah,
fan.
absolutely. Yeah, I when people ask about my board work, one way I describe it is basically a bunch of intellectual piranhas sitting around a table ripping an issue apart, not the person, but just going hard at it. And like I said before, I enjoy that directing the cadence and bringing people into the conversation and just watching. And also, myself, I have to be careful not to dominate the conversations, etc. So it's all that balancing I really enjoy. I just want to go back to a point you made earlier about the diversity. I remember reading an article a year or two ago about the study they did on businesses in the UK. I assume they were listed because they had board of directors. I think that was where they got the data from. But those that had, and this diversity was just a gender study on those that had more females on their boards were like 7% more profitable. So it's very important.
Yeah, there's so much data to back it up. There's a bit of a pushback on it at the moment, and I think that's just because people took it to ridiculous extremes. I think people also get really hung up on, what diversity is when, for example, actually a friend of mine, she was trying to convince companies in Australia to get more diverse, and she was working with an engineering company, and they had five males in their 50s from engineering backgrounds that And they all agreed they needed more diversity. And the next time she met them, they very proudly said, "Yeah, we've got diversity now." And they had hired a sixth board member. It was a woman in her 50s who'd been to the same university as them, gone to the same companies as them. Exactly the same. It was basically them in a skirt. They were like, "We've got diversity." She's like, "Oh, well, it's a start." So, yeah, I think people kind of get hung up on it, but it does look, at the end of the day, as a director, your job is to make the best decision for all the stakeholders involved, and you can't do that if everyone is coming at an idea from the same background. Like you want someone to challenge your ideas and yeah, look at it in a different perspective, and that makes you a better director for doing that.
Absolutely. And the final piece, I think, around boards for small businesses in particular is the accountability piece, especially if it's a sole founder. They've got no one to report to. So to keep
Yeah.
them front and center on the important things like, financial management, cash flows, forecasting, reporting, all those kind of things. That's another important piece I've found as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that was how I kind of fell into this as a young entrepreneur. It's kind of I set up one of my first companies, and um, there's that initial period of euphoria that you're your own boss, and then you realize that your boss is an idiot. And so you don't know, like there's so many things that you could be working on that you kind of like, well, where do I prioritize? Now, I didn't have the verbiage to call it a board of advisors, but I very quickly learned that finding smarter people than me and buying them lunch once a month, or taking them for a coffee, or trying to get them drunk and learn their secrets, and anything that could like keep me there. And then sort of for my own discipline and accountability, I would start emailing them every week and just say, "Hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I've done this week." And it was, yeah, that became a super powerful discipline. And whether they wanted it or not, they got it. And it kind of, yeah, it built a lot of trust. And a few times I'd get a reply and they go, "Really don't think that's where your clients are going to be focused on. Why don't you ask this question instead?" And yeah, again, completely changes where you spend your time.
Now, I've had a few people ask me, like, how do they get on boards?
Mm.
Um, so particularly down the smaller to medium size of a business. So how does your business help people? Like, is it a training course? Is it one-on-one group coaching, things like that?
Yeah, so it's a training course and a community, and we have a very staged progression. So first thing, like if somebody joins our program, we have companies coming to us all the time saying, "Hey, we want Veblen trained directors on our boards." Um, so the first thing is they'll probably join an existing small board of advisors of a small private company, just to kind of get their feet wet and kind of understand what's going on. The next thing we challenge them to do is to go and build a board for a company that doesn't have a board. So go and find a small business, offer to build a board for them, go back into the Veblen community, find 4 or 5 good people, set this board up, help that company to scale. You've now demonstrated that you understand the boards and the structure. And then when it comes to, for those that want to go up to the PLC level, which is kind of quite tricky to get into. So what we do there, and the reason I don't think I fully appreciated why it is so difficult to break into that PLC, public listed company world. But what you discover is that most directors, they're under so much scrutiny and so much stress in a board situation with shareholders and everything else. They're terrified of doing a bad hire. And it's not like customer service where you just fire the person and hire someone else. If you hire a board member and they turn out to be rubbish or disruptive, if you fire them, the whole board looks incompetent and the share price plummets. If you retain them, the average tenure of a board is 9 years. That's a long time to put up with a pain in the ass. So basically what you find, and even though there's been all this talk about diversity, very little has actually shifted on boards. And it's because board members are terrified of making the wrong hiring decision. So what we do is we say, "Okay, look, we understand that. Let's create an apprentice board for you. It's not going to cost your company anything. You don't pay the apprentices. They don't have a vote. They can't cause any disruption. They sit quietly in your meetings. And most meetings are by Zoom now anyway, so they just sit there quietly. They're there to learn from you. And then what we teach our Veblen members is, look, the expectation is very low. You're just an apprentice. You're just there to learn. Now let's make you the most valuable person on the board. And the way we do that is you do all the stuff that board members hate doing. So most board members are terrible at investor relations. It's completely out of their realm of comfort. They don't know how to do it. And so if you put your hand up and say, hey, would you like some help talking to investors and sharing why they should invest in you? Like, yeah, go for it. And then every single government and every country I'm aware of is currently pushing through more and more ESG regulations, so environmental societal governance. I guarantee you there's not a single director on the planet that's rubbing their hands together going, ooh, ESG reporting. I can't wait to get my teeth into that. So they're all dreading it. And then if this little apprentice goes, would you like me to do all your ESG reporting for you? Can't take it. And suddenly at the end of 6 to 12 months, you are the most valuable person on the board because you're the one that knows the investors. You're the one that's keeping the company legally tight. And now they know you and they like you and they trust you. And it's very easy for them to say, okay, well, let's bring you on as a full director. At that stage, you basically, we call it a Trojan horse. It's like this way of getting in, and in a way that kind of the idea of sending a CV and hoping you get, I mean, that's not how anyone gets a board seat. That's
No.
It's a myth perpetrated by recruitment companies that want your CV. It's not how it actually happens at all.
No, I
So
love that approach. That's great. Mm.
and then, as you know, once you're on a board, you just get opportunities like people know you're on a board and they go, oh, you're on a board, would you be interested in sitting on our board? And like it snowballs from there.
Yeah, that's it. It's that getting that first one is the chicken and egg dilemma.
Yeah.
How did you start out? Talking before we hit record, we both started in business late 99, a bit over 25 years ago now.
Yeah, when we were toddlers. So actually, I mean, I started as a kid, just like little I think my first one was cleaning cars in the local neighborhoods, and I had an ice cream business selling ice cream to pubs and restaurants around Cambridge in the UK. And so I kind of always had that mentality of if you need money, you make it yourself. And then I was doing a degree in business and computing, and one summer, I went to temp at an internet company, and like it was just full of people my age making tons of money. This was, let's say, 97, 98. Internet was booming. And I was like, I'm not going back to university. Like I would be going to university to get this, and I've got this. So stayed there. And I spent a couple of years. I think I got promoted 6 times. Not because I was very good. Like technically, everyone there was like they had been geeks all their lives, and I wasn't. But I was the only person that could actually articulate what the problem was to management and to clients, and so I was getting promoted very quickly, and then started getting headhunted. So like at this point, I don't know, 23 years old, being paid way too much money, living in Amsterdam with a bunch of other people my age being paid way too much money. It was great. And now I've got headhunters offering to fly over and take me out for meals and things. I'm thinking, why are they spending so much time and effort trying to get me a job? And so I kind of tried to figure out the business model. And in those days, it was basically they would have a daily rate, and they would take 25% on top. So once they'd placed you, if it was a 6-month contract and we were getting paid a lot of money, and they're just sitting there getting all this money, I thought, well, hang on, that's a good game. And I know all the IP engineers in Europe and I know all the telcos. So why don't I play this game? So me and a mate set up a recruitment company. And yeah, for a glorious, relatively short period, we made hay while the sun shone, and it was amazing. And of course, as a someone in my early 20s making a ton of money. I thought I was incredibly clever. And then the bubble burst, and turned out I wasn't nearly as clever as I thought I was. But I was kind of broken at that point. It's difficult to go back into any kind of corporate world after that. So that was that. And then kind of when I'd been setting that business up, I'd been looking at the big macro trends, and obviously tech and broadband, which is kind of was my space at the time. That was one of the big trends. But the other one that stood out to me was there was the largest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind from west to east. It was late 90s kind of. You'd had the Asian tiger thing, and that was still, China was booming, India was booming. And yeah, as a young entrepreneur, it just seemed to make more sense to be on the receiving end of that equation than the giving end. So I moved out to Asia or 2002 or something. And have been here ever since, but always kind of had or at least for the last 10-15 years had a very global footprint with all the businesses that we work with.
And the current, you said your day job's the mergers and acquisition M&A stuff. So are you working for a company to do that, or that's part of your own?
That's part of my. So I've got a number of companies. So myself and my business partner Jeremy Harbour, we've had for the last 10 years. We've been basically finding like half the world's economy is locked in these small businesses that should have boards that don't have boards. Just boring old economy businesses. They're not sexy enough for venture capital. They're too small for private equity. And yet they're half the world's economy. There's no financial instrument for sophisticated capital to invest into that space, even though it's the biggest asset class on the planet. And so what we've been doing is creating a publicly listed holdco and finding these businesses, grouping them together and taking them public, but leaving the founders in control. So it's basically a collaborative of business owners that use public wrapper to get some liquidity, to pitch for bigger contracts, to give stock to their staff, do their own M&A, that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was kind of that's the day job. And that was kind of ultimately what led to the learnings around my frustrations with some of the boards that we sat on.
Yeah, great. And back to Veblen. So what year did you start that, and how old were you?
So 2 years ago, and I was 21.
No.
2 years ago, and I was 47, I guess.
47.
Yeah.
Wow, we're very similar, not just hairstyle. I'm 50, you're 49 now, and
Yeah, I'm just a young pup.
I've got a business degree majoring in accounting and a computing degree. Sounds like that's what you were studying as well.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, the one that we focus on is basically the number of board seats. So what's interesting is so we've got 200 members at the moment. We had about 5 to 10 a month. We obviously we filter quite heavily. We want to make sure that we can definitely get these people board seats, and they'll add real value to the community. We're about a 50-50 split on employees, so like managers and executives, and entrepreneurs. And especially amongst the employees, they keep asking us for certificates. And we're like, no, the purpose of this is to get a board seat. I like that. There's no need to have a certificate. If you've got a board seat, you're getting paid, you're getting more board opportunities. That's our measure of success. You don't need something on the wall. So I think a lot of people have kind of they've missed the result for the process. And I think, yeah, to be fair, there's a lot of people out there that just sell process and sell certificates for the sake of certificates. I mean, a lot of, I don't want to badmouth any, but there's certainly institutions that sell directors' certificates. And what they teach is they teach you best practice of corporate governance for an S&P 500 company. And that's fascinating if you like that sort of thing, but it's completely irrelevant to a small business. In fact, if you tried to apply big corporate governance best practice to a small business, you would kill. Yeah. And you tell me, you've been on 5 boards. Have you ever sat in a board meeting where someone's gone, You know what we need? We need someone with a certificate. Like it's just not how it works. And so we end up with a lot of people who have done these certificates in the belief that they would then get a board seat, and of course it's irrelevant. So we're very much focused on, get connected to investors. Investors are people that can make a big difference. Figure out, how you become an advocate for the company, how you can introduce them to new partners. Focus on stuff that you can actually do that will make a real difference, and not in the business. So to your point earlier, often with entrepreneurs, we have to beat out a little bit of that habit of wanting to go in and fix it themselves. And so that's not the job anymore.
That's it. I mean, all my roles are non-executive, which for the audience means I don't work in the business. And for most of them, I'm independent. I don't own shares in those businesses either, which just brings a different lens to the conversations because I can say to a founder who may be on the board or reporting into the board, I don't give a flying fuck what you think. I don't think that's the best decision for all the other shareholders in the business. You're not getting my vote. So rarely comes that, as you know.
Yeah.
Down the smaller end, it doesn't often go to a formal vote. But yeah.
Yeah.
And what about team size for Veblen? How many full-time equivalents to start with and where are you at now?
So the whole business is virtual and globally dispersed. So our CFO is in Melbourne, our CEO is in the UK, I'm in Singapore, our COO is in an island off Portugal, and then the rest of the team is dotted all over the world. And they're mostly, doing this amongst other things. So that's I kind of I very deliberately built the business that way, and our members are very globally dispersed. I think we're in 60 countries, and that was very deliberate. It's a pain because everyone wants to meet and connect in person, but it just gives you so many more opportunities once you start thinking globally, and once you're not restricted. Like, I mean, just by definition, there's always going to be more opportunities outside of your country than inside your country. There's always going to be more smart people outside of your country than inside your country. So if you can utilize them, why wouldn't you? Like it takes a bit of getting used to. But so yeah, that's sort of been the approach that we've taken.
The rough number of full-time equivalent working on Veblen at the moment.
Probably about 7 or 8.
Yep, great.
Yeah.
And just started as 1 or 2 FTE, you and your founder? Kind of both part-time then?
Uh, yeah, kind of. Actually, I mean, it just started with me and an intern, and then I have another company that does like a digital agency, so I sort of use them for a lot of the content production and bits and pieces. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to kind of draw a ring around it because everyone serves multiple roles.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Uh, do we ever? Uh,
I'm going to remove this question because more than 80% of the time, because we're all wired that way, it never stops, does it?
yeah, no, I think and it always makes me laugh when you kind of see those interviews with people and they go, "Oh, we're doing 10 million a year. It's beyond my wildest dreams." Oh, fuck, you lack imagination. When I start a business, I'm immediately going, right, how do we get to 100 million? Uh, yeah, look, I there's levels and there's obviously kind of maturity and uh, you're not desperate for money in a way that you were when you're younger. Uh, but you're constantly striving to grow and get to the next level. So yeah, always looking forward to what we can do more.
What does success look like to you?
Ironically, success looks like a level of comfort with failure. So I borrow a line from the All Blacks, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's something that Richie McCaw used to talk about a lot. And I think when you do reach that level of just okay, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to do something I don't want to, would rather not do. But and that's the best thing when you're constantly feeling comfortable stepping into those awkward situations, then you've kind of found success regardless, really.
You would have seen this across a lot of businesses. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
To marketing.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for partnerships. So I wrote a book called Progressive Partnerships about 10 years ago, which is really, and by the way, any of my books, including the latest one, Boardroom Blueprint, if you go to callumlaing.com and stick your email address in, you get them all for free. Um, but progressive partnerships was really how you can scale up using other people's resources, and just leverage off more and more partnerships to scale. And yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. And if you look at kind of the trajectories of any successful companies, you can normally see that pivot point when they do a really successful JV, and it just takes the business to the next level. So understanding how to do partnerships, understanding that most partnerships don't work, but you can, if you understand that, you can structure them in a way that you still benefit, even if the partnership doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And I think that's yeah, that still remains the sort of the number one trick to growing.
And how did you fund the business?
Uh, I did it really low cost, actually. In fact, yeah, with this one, I did. So after years and years and years of doing it the wrong way with starting up businesses when I was younger. So I kind of talked to my mates. My mates would say, "Yeah, that's a great idea." I would then stick all of my money, time, and effort building the business, and I'd go back to them and go, "Do you want to buy it?" And they go, "Ah, it's not a good time." And, so after years of doing that, I finally kind of learned the lesson. And with Veblen, I put out that email. I got a few applications. I then did a webinar talking about what it was like. I think I sold the first 6 or 7 memberships before I'd created any of the actual course. And then so basically it was self-funded from that. Then puts you under a massive amount of pressure because you actually have to deliver and keep selling to keep the wheels going. But it was always something that yeah, a lot of what I've done over the years has been about building communities, and this idea of, hang about, if we've got 200 people in this network sitting on 300 board seats, yeah, in a few years' time, if that's 2,000 people sitting on 3 or 4,000 board seats, that's a massively valuable network. And part of why I was trying to do it was that if you're somebody that is ambitious and driven but young, so for example, we've got like a 25-year-old that's now sitting on a couple of boards. How much business experience does a 25-year-old have? Right, not a lot. But if they're plugged in to this network, that makes them valuable just because they've got access to all these resources. And so the idea was that when you come to me wanting to get a board seat, I've got no idea what your background is. I can't change that. The only thing I can filter for is your attitude. So if you're driven and ambitious, then that's what we're looking for. And at the very least, I can tap you into this network. So you're driven, you're ambitious, you're tapped into a network, you can add value to a business. And then you kind of learn from there and what works and what doesn't.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yes, because it was a problem that I really wanted to solve because it frustrates me when talented people are being overlooked because they went to the wrong school or look a different way. So absolutely yes for that, and equally, yeah, when I was a young entrepreneur, I wanted to be connected to directors sitting on companies all over the world. That would have been awesome. And now I'm connected to directors sitting all over the world. So, yeah, absolutely.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Just the one.
If you've got a couple of pearlers, you can throw them in.
Oh, crikey. Just the one from today, or
That can be any business. Yeah.
yeah. Look, I've been through many of them. I think when the dot-com boom burst, and I kind of had to go through that humbling experience of realizing that I actually had no idea what I was doing. That was one thing. At the global financial crisis, I had a number of businesses, and my two biggest clients each defaulted on $1 million that they owed me. And I had to lay off 38 of 42 staff. And that was just brutal.
Mm.
And yeah, at the time, I just could not see a way out of that. I was in debt. Yeah, it just seemed like a huge black hole. One of the first companies that we took public got attacked by a white collar criminal. And we basically destroyed $250 million of shareholder value in about 6 months' time, and kind of got all of the abuse from shareholders from when that happened. And that was a pretty dark and painful time as well. But you kind of, I think, with every one that you go through, you realize it's not the end of the world. You're still there. Yeah, I remember with the global financial crisis one, I kind of thought, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like I'd built up these businesses. I was relatively high profile in kind of a small niche. I thought, oh God, everyone's going to be laughing at us. Nobody cares. Like everyone's got their own problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of get through it, and people focus on how you can create value for them. That's it. So if you get back into, all right, I just need to create more value for more people, you get through it. And yeah, I mean, I sort of joke, but the stuff that you deal with on a daily basis this morning would have been soul destroying 20 years ago. Now it's kind of, yeah, it is what it is. We'll deal with it.
And what area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Um, I so I think kind of the personal development space that I uh, was the hardest for me to overcome was the public speaking piece. So when I was so my first overseas stint, or first time in Asia, we ended up in Bangkok because my now wife is a primary school teacher, and she got a job in Bangkok. So I started there, and it's just one of those things. Like I knew like every single person I looked up to in business was great on stage. And I thought, right, like I've got to do that, and I was terrified. So I went to Toastmasters every week for 2 years, and eventually kind of beat it out of myself, and got better at it. But yeah, that was the one that was probably the hardest to overcome, because I had a real visceral reaction to getting on stage. I'd literally not be able to eat for 36 hours before a big presentation. I'd be terrified.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
I actually quite like fast growth. I think, uh, yeah, I kind of, the hardest thing for me actually is when we start to plateau, keeping focused and not switching up what we've been doing that's working, because I tend to like the new shiny thing, like most
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. So I have to put people around me to make sure that we just stick to the knitting and get the key stuff done. And when I'm setting up new businesses and new ventures, which I do on a fairly regular basis, too often, having like completely separate teams, and letting them do their thing. So um, yeah, fast growth I enjoy. Plateauing I struggle with a lot.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Definitely the people. Like your team, like watching your team grow. So yeah, the intern that I started this business with, just done amazing work. And yeah, watching it, and he now sits on the boards of a couple of companies. And Yeah, so watching your team grow and evolve, and I guess actually to answer the previous conversation, I guess the hardest bit is when somebody has done an amazing job getting you from here to there, and then they've reached their limit, and you have to have the hard conversation and move on to somebody else. And that's difficult when you know they've kind of poured blood, sweat, and tears into getting you to that point. But yeah, that would probably be the toughest bit.
What has been the biggest mindset shift in your small business growth journey?
Happen all the time. And, yeah, look, I'm constantly evaluating stuff and testing new business models and trying new things. And I mean, a recent one is I've never been a fan of cold outreach, and yet we're having insane success with cold outreach on Twitter at the moment, which baffles me. But it's working. So yeah, I'm constantly amazed at what works and what doesn't work, and what worked 6 months ago is now not working, and vice versa.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I think it's probably a discipline, but I don't necessarily think you need to be disciplined yourself. I think if you can put, so again, you mentioned it at the top of the call about this idea of accountability, and I think having accountability to keep you disciplined, keep you on track, is really important. So yeah, for me, uh, I've always I've always had this idea of trying to surround myself with smarter people than me, and I think that's it just forces you to be better and to challenge yourself. So that's probably been the most useful for me.
Do you need a guide on how to build your own money printing marketing machine? Do you feel like marketing is a mysterious art, only cracked by a chosen few? Fear not, we get it. Mastering marketing can be like taming a dragon. Download a copy of the Marketing Funding Flywheel ebook, which has 41 pages packed with over 50 tools and tips for your business. Let's get into it. Head to growasmallbusiness.com. We have plenty of resources waiting for you in the footer of our website. Can you talk how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? Obviously, you've hired a shit ton of people over the years in many, many countries and companies.
Yeah, I think so. I fell into this idea that a lot of us have about sort of stereotypes around. So, for example, I lived in Thailand, and Thailand's very relaxed. And if you've ever been there, it's a beautiful country, and everyone's very chilled out. And um, I remember getting really frustrated by the staff that I was hiring in Thailand because they were really relaxed and chilled out, and I just could not get any urgency. And I was complaining about them to somebody that had built a $500 million business in Thailand, and she said, go and go into Starbucks and see what your experience is in Starbucks." And I went into Starbucks, and they were Starbucks. They were like well trained, polite, hardworking, did exactly the same thing. And you go to Singapore, it's the same, and you go to the Philippines, it's the same. And I was like, okay, right, I've got to stop blaming other people. You have the country culture is irrelevant, or this idea that millennials are lazy. This is bullshit. They're a driven, hardworking, ambitious people anywhere. Uh, your job is to try and unleash them and create a culture where they want to perform at their best. So I think as soon as I started to take ownership of that, and realize that it was my fault, not theirs, everything shifted.
That's a really good insight, the way that she put that to go. Yeah, that's genius. You go and look into how Starbucks is in Thailand.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
A really good book on this. I know it might be difficult for you to read, but it's a bloke was embedded with the All Blacks for 6 weeks, and he wrote this amazing book called Legacy. Stephen Kerr, James Kerr, and it's basically about how they've maintained dominance over 100 years and the culture that they've built. I the reason I like it is that I find most of the stuff you read about company culture always talks about successful businesses. So they go, well, Netflix is really good. Look at their company culture. And then they basically retrospectively look at that and go, well, that's why they're successful. Um, the very few of the sort of the conversations about company culture survive going through a downturn. You very rarely hear about, well, this company laid off 2,000 people, but God, had a great company culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of become a little bit skeptical of it. It's quite easy to have a good company culture when things are going well. It's very difficult to do that when things are going badly. So I think, yeah, hire good people, give them, trust them to do a good job, and fingers crossed.
Yeah, the only reason why I didn't react to your All Blacks comment is, I mean, I love my sport and I am Australian, and there's obviously a massive arch rivalry across the Tasman, but I don't really care about rugby. I've just never gotten into it, so we'll let that one go.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, I'd still, even without the love of rugby, I would still recommend this book. It's very
That reminds me of a book I've just recently finished called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Have you read
oh,
that
yeah,
one?
it's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, I've been
yeah,
putting it off
such a
for
good
ages,
book.
and business mates saying you got to listen to it, you got to read it. I only do audiobooks, but I thought, no, 13 hours, over 13 hours. Had to clean the house because I'm moving and packing up, and so I thought I'll do it, and I got hooked. I couldn't put the
Yeah,
earpods down.
such a good
It's
book.
oh
Yes,
yeah.
really good. Yeah.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Balance in my life.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't.
that was the quickest response yet on that question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I could say I do, but my wife wouldn't agree.
Yeah.
No, the one thing I am super disciplined about is sport. So I every day I have to do my exercise, and that takes priority over everything else. And then yeah, try and do plenty of trips away with the family and stuff, or switch off. But um, yeah, look, if I tend to do chunks. So I'll kind of have like 90 days of full on just grinding out and working long hours, and then I'll sort of pull back a bit. But no, I haven't really figured out balance, but I'm not sure. I've never seen anyone successful that's that balanced.
And how much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Tons, insane amounts, and constantly looking to learn and evolve, and yeah, you have to, like, it's and never stops.
And have you had mentors or coaches along the way? You've mentioned coaches before, an early
Yeah,
one.
yeah. So yeah, I actually so when the whole global financial crisis thing happened, and I was kind of in a really dark space, and I was like, right, I need something to kind of get me out of this. And so I knew two business coaches at the time. One of them I really liked, who was really, really good guy. And the other one I really didn't like. It was this arrogant Dutch guy that was just brutally honest. And I was like, right, I know what I've got to do.
Yep, he's the one.
Yeah. And I hired him, and yeah, we ended up becoming massive friends. He ended up becoming a coach at the Veblen Director Program, and unfortunately passed away very recently. But yeah, no, I think having a coach and being coachable is very, very important.
Yep, totally agree. And perfect question for you. Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Well, that's a good idea. Yes, yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously with all of our public companies, we have boards, and that's a great place that we can place our Veblen members. Veblen has its own board made up of Veblen members as well. And yeah, yeah. It's a hugely valuable resource that would be nuts not to.
And Callum, you're one of the few we've had on that's exited a business. Any advice for those listening or thinking of exiting one day?
Yeah, it's a big topic. We could spend the day on it. Look, I think I think entrepreneurs generally don't understand investors and they don't understand company buyers. And to be a successful entrepreneur, you've got to understand your client. You've got to understand the problems that you're solving. So if you're thinking of selling your company in a couple of years, you need to spend the next 2 years understanding the problems of the person that's going to buy your company and basically modeling your company to be a solution that solves that problem for them. So if they want ongoing revenue stream without any hassles, then that's what you need to buy. If they want to buy you just for the revenue, but they don't care about profit, then build the revenue and don't worry about the profit. Kind of build to demand. So we do most of our stuff in the public markets, but we've also got a private equity company that's basically said, look, if you build a group to this and it hits this criteria and this criteria, we'll buy it for this. And you really need to understand that, because I think this you have a lot of business owners kind of reach this point and go, right, I'm fed up with this business, I'm going to sell it, and they've got no idea what they're doing, and so they go, well, I'll use a broker, and the broker will say, oh yeah, I can definitely get you a good price for that, no problem. And yeah, it's not really the never believe a business broker as a good rule of thumb. But yeah, you've got to understand why someone would buy your business and position it for that. That's critical.
Have you read any of John Morillow's 3 books or listened to his podcast?
Yeah, so
Built to Sell, Automatic Customer,
yes, yeah.
and The Art of Selling a Business. We've had John on a couple of times on our cast. This is the main one we're doing, this format, and our Quick Fire Friday, which is one expert, one topic in less than 20 minutes. But on that cast, John and I were talking about the stats. Something like 90% of businesses that go on market to sell never sell.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, it's and it's tough because it's people they've invested so much of their time and effort building the business, but nobody cares. Like nobody care. Your clients don't care how much time and effort you spent in the product. What they care about is, do you solve a problem? Now you just need to shift your focus. And look, it's what we found when we went into the public markets as well. Like these, and yes, Australia is the same. Like companies go public, the directors or the executive directors already have a full-time job. Like they're already working long hours with clients and staff. But somebody's got to be talking to the investors, and doing a client pitch to investors is it's the wrong market. Like you have to understand what an investor is looking for, and position yourself as a solution to that. And most people just don't do that. So it's no wonder, unfortunately.
Great advice. All right, Callum, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Look, ultimately, if you get the right team together, then it becomes relatively easy. So I guess finding the right team and keeping them all aligned and motivated is probably the key thing.
Favorite business book would just help you the most?
Look, it's a slightly glib answer, but my own books, not from the content perspective, but what they've given me in terms of access to speaking on podcasts and speaking at events and stuff. So putting your knowledge and condensing your knowledge down into a book is actually a super valuable thing. But I tend to, I'm a very big reader, and at different stages in your business, different books resonate and teach you different things. And so yeah, there's lots. A good friend of mine is Daniel Priestley. He's written some amazing books. Key Person of Influence, 24 Assets, oversubscribed.
He's an Aussie, still living in London.
Yeah, he's so he was up in the Sunshine Coast and then moved to London probably about 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, it's good.
His stuff's good. I've finished one of his books. Yeah.
No, he's a very, very smart guy.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Well, this would be my favorite. Yeah, I honestly don't listen to many, to be honest. I have my own, but and which has been great for meeting people. But yeah, no, more sort of a reader than a listener.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Boards.
Hmm,
Get an
good.
advisory board.
Yeah, bloody great advice, that. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on starting out on day one about 25 years ago?
Doesn't matter. I wouldn't have listened. Just unfortunately, say I look back at some of the amazing mentors and people I've had over the years, and like some of the advice they gave me was so good. If I just followed it, if I
Yep.
just actually believed them and stuck with it, it would have made my life so much easier. Um,
Just ignored it with hubris.
yeah, or I mean, sometimes it was that. Sometimes I just didn't have the context to understand it. So like they said it, I smiled and nodded and moved on. But and then looking back, you go, God, that was so bang on, but I just didn't have the experience, the maturity, whatever to apply it. So yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Callum. I really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations on a very storied and successful and varied career since the late 1990s, and now focusing on helping people become board members, either advisory board members or board directors on boards, and going from 1 to 7 FTE in this business, but some very successful businesses of various sizes and shapes in between. So thanks very much.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun chatting.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.